Hey everybody, welcome back. Figured we'd put out a quick DIY. Well, not so quick. It's about 26 minutes long, but this one's on a DIY table for our van. We looked at these Lagoon tables and really like them, but just really couldn't justify the $189 price on these. So, you know, being me, figured I would try and make one of my own with some parts I had laying around the house already, and picked up a few different things from Home Depot and Lowe's. So going to walk you through this video here as best I can to tell you my process. My process is pretty much different than most everybody else's, where I pretty much wing it. This is a super strut, so this is what I used. I had a piece of this laying around the house from building the roof rack for the van, and I got this idea that, hey, that might work for a table. So you can get the, I don't know how long that one is. I'm not quite sure, but that was a long one. I had a long one and I cut it down to the size I needed. Picked up a piece of this galvanized pipe, 1 1/4 inch, works just perfect. I got the 18 inch. You can get longer ones if you want. You can see how we use that in just a little bit. So it's really kind of up to you. Also picked up one of these flanges. Man, these things are freaking expensive. I don't know why they charge $15 for that little piece there, but you got to get one to match your galvanized pipe. I also picked up 2 of these. They're called clamping knobs or replacement knobs from Hillman. This one is a 5/16 18. Lowe's shows it as a 5/8 inch length, but they're actually 1 1/2 is what they have in the store. I've been wanting one of these tap and die sets for a while. Didn't really have a need for it until now. I had a coupon for 20% off at Harbor Freight, so I went and picked up one of these, and you'll see what we're going to do with it in just a little bit. When you buy one of these, just make sure that the sizes are what you need. This one has both standard and metric sizes in there, so I double checked. It does have the 5/16 18 tap in the set, so that'll come in handy. But with that, of course, I get back to the house and realize I didn't have the right size drill bit for a 5/16 18, so I wasn't sure what size it was, so I went online and looked. 5/16 18. It's a 17/64 bit. Who has a 17/64 bit in their toolkit? Not me. So what'd I do? Sent Lynn to Home Depot and picked this one up. It does metal, wood, PVC, so it's one bit that I have. It will probably get lost, so I'm going to have to put this somewhere where I'm not going to forget where I put it in case I want to use it for a 5/16 18 threaded whatever at some point. Anyway, this is the van inside of it. Planning on putting the table mount in between the 2 lids of the bench. You can see the left side's got the toilet in it. The right side normally carries our cooler, but we found a different way to store that and use it as a step stool getting up into the bed. So what I'm going to do is cut off this end here using the jigsaw and just hack that sucker right off, and then the table leg will fit right in there. Wasn't the straightest of cuts, but it does for what we needed to do. Test fitting one of the pieces there. Just had a little scrap piece just to make sure it was going to fit in there. Get my measurements correct. I was concerned a little bit about knees and stuff hitting that, but if it gets to be a problem, then I'll just put a piece of pool foam or pipe insulation or something other on it. So that's the piece of super strut that I had laying around, left over from the roof rack. So next we're going to be marking out the dimensions on this. Measured about 17 inches up. Will work just fine for the galvanized pipe that I got. I got an 18-inch pipe, so it'll stick up just a little bit. You know, gonna mark it off, make sure everything's square, and then cut it off. I did pick up a while back. Picked up one of those portable bandsaws. I had the power bandsaws or whatever you call them. I'm not even sure what you call them, from Harbor Freight. It's a Bauer brand, but this sucker works pretty good. I used it on this super strut to cut the pieces for the roof rack, and it worked pretty good. You know, most people use the aluminum ones and everything, but I really couldn't justify the price difference in the two, and there's not really that many of them up on the roof anyway to to cause a lot of issues. May expand upon it a little bit later at some other time to maybe put some solar panels or something up there. But yeah, it cuts through the super strut like butter. Next we're going to drill, and this is that drill bit. We're going to put some holes in there and put some knobs so we can hold the galvanized pipe up. It took a little bit. I just got a cheaper Ryobi tabletop or benchtop bandsaw. Yeah, benchtop drill press. But it worked just fine using that new drill bit. Put a little WD-40 on there just to help it out a little bit. You know, I'm not an expert at any of this stuff by any means, but you know, I can usually get the job done sufficiently to work for what I need to get done. But it did cut through pretty good. Now we're going to move on to tapping those holes. That super strut is not real thick, but it does put enough threads in there for the knob. You can see the knob kind of sitting off to the background there. That's the one we're going to be using that we got from Lowe's, I believe it was. So yeah, so just a bit into there. It cut the threads into the super strut really nice. You know, for a cheap Harbor Freight tap and die set, you really can't beat it. I've used these before at work, and they work pretty good. But we cut 4 holes. I put 2 on each side. That way we could alternate, you know, depending on what side worked better. I figured while I was at it, I'd just cut 2 holes in the other side as well and tap those out. But it worked out pretty good. The bit kept coming out, or the tap kept coming out of the handle because I couldn't really get it tight. Maybe throw some lube on there or something or other, help it out a little bit. But it did work out pretty good. Clean them off here real good with my paper towel, and then just check it just to make sure that it fits in there. But it fits real good. Take a look at the knob, the way the 3 points are on there. You'll see a little bit of a difference on the final product on that, because the positioning of those kind of interfered with the base of the bench that it's mounted to. But it still worked out. I had to shave off a little bit of them to get it to actually be able to turn the knob without hitting the bench. So I really just kind of found this by accident, whether that this pipe fit in the super strut like it did. I did run into a few issues, and again, you're going to kind of see some of those issues that I ran into with this, but it came out in the end exactly how we wanted it to, and it works great, works really well. And it would probably work with just one of the knobs, but you know, for extra support, and depending on, we're not going to be putting a whole lot of weight on it. It's mostly just, you know, eating off the table or putting a laptop on it or something like that to do some work when we're on the road or whatever. But you can see this one here is the one I got. It says 1/2 inch. So it's actually a 1/2 inch. I think I said earlier it was a 1.5 inch. The website actually says it's a 5/8, but the ones they have in the stores are actually a 1/2 inch, which, you know, for our purposes, 1.5 would have actually been a little too long. So we went with the 1/2 inch. Works really well for this. It doesn't stick out at all. So, you know, it is what it is. It works. So I'm not complaining about it. Some people complain in the comments about it not reflecting, you know, not actually being what it was in the store. But I can see that. If you wanted a 5/8 and you went there and it was only a 1/2 inch, then maybe you would get a little upset. So this is one of the bolts that I had gotten to secure the super strut to the bench. And when I put it in there, I knew that when I put the galvanized pipe in there that there was not going to be a whole lot of clearance for a bolt head to be put in. Mosquito truck's going by. I don't know if you can hear it. So I figured, well, I got a little grinder, little benchtop grinder. I'll just flatten the head and it should work just fine. But this is one of those, again, Harbor Freight grinders. I've just put off getting a real benchtop grinder, and well, this one just sucks. Bottom line, don't buy. My recommendation is to not buy that little Harbor Freight thing, unless maybe you're making jewelry or something other where you don't need a whole lot of power to do anything. And so pulled out the old angle grinder with a metal grinding head on it, and went to town on this, and it worked out really well. You'll notice one thing while I'm doing this, I had not taken into consideration the heat that would build up, or the heat would be, the amount of heat that would transfer into that bolt. And I didn't notice it when I did the first bolt. You see it's grinding it down pretty good, and it did what I needed it to do. So I got into the vice grips there. So when I finished, I just kind of open it up. I just chucked it down onto the table. I didn't touch the bolt, which is a good thing, and you'll see here in just a second why it's a good idea to either wear gloves or just make sure you don't touch the bolt. I did notice that the vice grips were getting a little warm up in there, but you know, that's to be expected. I knew that it was going to happen. You can see it's getting kind of red, getting dark, it's changing color as it heats up. Ooh, that one got kind of orange on there. Throwing some sparks. So I set it down on the table. I noticed a little bit of smoke. I was like, huh. So yeah, so look how hot it is. This is instant branding iron. If I had touched that, whew, that would not have been a good day. But I didn't, so, you know, it's all good. So another thing, so I got some washers just to make sure that when it went into the Super Strut, it would hold it in there. And I knew that the washers were too wide to fit into the track of the Super Strut. So I hollowed them out, and I wanted that washer, the square part of it, to fit flush against that washer, so it wouldn't stick out too far, and the galvanized pipe would go down into the Super Strut easily. So I just drilled out the holes. I got one of those step drill bits. Worked great. Fits in there just fine. So see, now it fits flat, and everything's good on that one. So I did 2 of those washers like that. I did do a test fit on a piece of Super Strut that I had, but obviously it was a different piece of Super Strut than I used for the base of the table. So I knew when I got the washers they'd be a little bit big. So just to show you on my little test piece here, I knew I was going to have to grind off a couple of the sides, or 2 of the sides, and make them flat so it would fit in there. So back to my angle grinder. Now it did work okay for this. Not my angle grinder, my little bench top grinder. It did work well enough for this. It flattened a washer well enough that it would fit into the Super Strut. So, you know, it's happy with it, with that one. I guess I could have used the angle grinder on this one too, but I just didn't. So I got those all flattened out and everything, and again, they fit in there now. They fit just fine. I knew there was the little bit of gap in between the flat there because of the rounded edges, but I figured I'd flatten those out. So I had this piece of, I think it's 3/4 inch plywood. This is what I'm going to use for the tabletop. So obviously I forget the exact dimensions on it. I just measured one of the laptops and made sure it would fit, and thought that would work pretty good with the dimensions that I had. Just kind of eyeballed it. So then I'm going to measure out, just kind of, again, eyeballing it. That's how I do my best work. The positioning of the base, that flange. So I just kind of mark it out there, put it in the middle. I put it offset, didn't put it in the center on purpose. That way, when you kind of swing it around as you're sitting, you could have more of it over top of you. But I still wanted enough to where somebody sitting on the other side of the pole would still be able to utilize the table for like eating or something like that as well. So, you know, you'll see in the end, final product, it does work out very well. Works out for our purposes. It's got threads on either end of it, but for some reason on this particular one, the threads on the end with that label on it didn't seat in there as well as the other end. But I eventually got it to work. So I'm just going to have to mark it, and that way we know which end needs to go in the easiest. Just screw it in there, and it works just fine. So it fits pretty good. Here's just kind of demonstrating how it's going to work. I do have a knob on either side. I just wanted to see how that would work, what that would look like, if it would work or not. The knob's tightened down really well, even though the Super Shredder's not that thick and there's not a whole lot of threads for it to grip into. Just might be a little bit concerned over time whether or not those threads will pull out. But as long as you don't crank down on it, I mean, you don't need to, so time will tell on that one. So I wanted to round the edges, and this is obviously a trick that everybody's seen on on YouTube, everybody using. So I just grabbed one of those discs and marked out my rounded edges just to make it a little bit easier on walking around in the van. Use my jigsaw to cut them out, and I wasn't sure when I was doing this with the what I was going to do with the stain, how I was going to finish it. Was I going to paint it? Was I going to stain it? It is plywood, and really this is just kind of a prototype. It may or may not be the finished product. If we decide we want a different tabletop, you can change it out just as easily. So, I mean, you can't be afraid to change stuff out, try different things. If one thing doesn't work, obviously try something new. I try stuff all the time that just, fails. Again, I'm not perfect, so I do what I can to make things because that's what I like to do. You can see by my fancy workshop here that, I make do with what I have. Plans are in works to fix this at some point down the road, but we're in no hurry. What we have works. We've remodeled the house, doing it this way. One of the best things we ever did was covering this deck out back. It was, it rains in South Georgia. It's hot, so you got to have, some place to do the work. This RotoZip, man, I bought this thing probably 20 years ago, and I've used it maybe a handful of times. But it works pretty good. I just put a regular roundover router bit in there. It works okay. It's obviously not as good as a dedicated router. I do have a full size router. I just didn't feel like pulling it out just for this quick little job. But it did what we needed it to do. It's not the best, the smoothest edges on there. But again, this is just a prototype. We needed it for a quick trip, and it got the job done. A little bit of tear out here and there, but a little sanding will fix that. Smooths everything over, right? So now on to knocking a little bit of the roughness off with this with the sander. I don't even know what kind of grit I used, but just a quick knockdown. And my first idea was to use this weathered wood accelerator from Varathane. We've used it in the house on a couple of different things, in the living room and the bathroom, and it on pine, tongue, and groove. It worked really well. I mean, it came out fantastic, but on plywood, not so much. It just looks like it's dirty. So I left it on there. I let it dry. Obviously I wasn't happy with it in the end. So I ended up staining it with some oak, some mission oak, I think, stain that I had with the poly already in it. And put a couple of coats of that on there, sanded it, made it smooth, and then I sealed it with. I had a can of spray poly that I ended up using on that. But it turned out nice, We just wanted to, so the liquids and stuff wouldn't soak in. So I got everything cut, drilled, tapped, measured out, all of that stuff. So get to the van to start the mounting process and see what it looks like. Make sure it fits, do all of that stuff. Again, eyeballing things. I usually sketch stuff out in advance. That way I usually, I have some dimensions and whatnot. But this time I just figured I'd wing it, like I mostly do most of the time, and see how it works. So there it is, drilling a hole in there, 2 places. I figured that would be enough. I've got a couple of wing nuts with washers that I'm going to use on the back side of it just to hold it on. That way we could take it off if we need be. I didn't want to make it permanent, and I wanted to make it easy enough to remove. That way, if it did stick out and, you know, was getting on our... Oh, look at that. So this is what I mentioned earlier. Yeah, it didn't fit. So I had a different test piece than what I was actually using. So back to the grinder. Got it down a little bit more, and let's see. Yep, okay, fits this time. So put it in there. Again, holding the washer on there, just great. There's a wing nut, put that on the back side. But yeah, so that's easy enough to take off in case, you know, we start bumping into it or whatnot. But like I said, I'm gonna get a pool noodle or some of that foam pipe insulation or whatever and kind of wrap around it if we need to. May not look the greatest, but it'll work. It's kind of tight spaces, a little tight space there in the van. So now I'm going to try and test the pipe, make sure that fits down in there, and what happens? Yeah. So, yeah, I ground the bolt head, right? Ground that flat using the angle grinder, but it still wasn't enough. So we tried several different things to spread it apart and whatnot, and took a little bit of persuasion, but we were able to spread the sides of that super strut out just enough, and you can't really tell. I mean, if you compare the two, you know, a piece that hasn't been persuaded with a regular piece or with a persuaded piece, then you know you might be able to see a little bit of a difference on it. But again, for our purposes, it works just fine. A little persuasion never helps never hurts anything, right? So you see right now, put it down in there, push it down. Fits snug like a glove. So there's the 2 holes, the notch cut out. So this is the finished product for us. I spray painted it. Ideally, I would have powder coated it. I do have a powder coater that I've never used again, but maybe down the road. I just don't have a big enough oven to put it in that I don't mind using for powder coating. So just, you know, a quick coat of spray paint to make it look fancy. We'll eventually paint the benches. We're actually thinking about redoing the van again, the layout in it. So this is probably all going to change at some point anyway. May end up painting the pipe, but there's you can see the tabletop after I stained it with the oak. I didn't bother with the bottom because I'm not too concerned about that right now. And here's those knobs I was telling you. I ended up grinding the ends down on each of the knobs. There's still enough to hold on to. But now when I turn it, see how it sits kind of right up against the bench. So I had to grind those down a little bit. Ideally, maybe some round knobs or something other would be better. But man, this thing works really good for a quick and dirty swiveling tabletop for your van or whatever you want to use it for. Removable, so you can get it out of the way. We can store it in the bench. It's height adjustable. You can rotate it, lock it into place with the knobs. It swings around. Again, you know, me just kind of winging it. My dimensions were a little long, so you can't rotate it all the way around. It hits up against that shelf unit in the back there. But I'm not concerned about that because even hitting the shelf unit, it's still in a good position for, you know, working on your laptop or whatever. And then you just rotate it out of the way and get up. If you want to sit on the other side, it works just fine on that. You can open up the van door, the sliding door, and sit there and eat whatever, or work on your computer, or do what you need to do. So really happy with it. It turned out really nice. And then one benefit of it, pardon the van, you know, we were getting ready for a trip, so it's a little bit of mess, and it's not completed. We just got it to the point where it worked, and we started traveling in it. So it's kind of in a state of flux right now. But so another advantage of it I did find is working in the kitchen over next to the countertop. So there's a sink built into that, and we have a gas cooktop that we put on top of there, just a little single burner. You could raise it up and use it as an additional workspace for when you're in the kitchen. It works out really good. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, maybe got a few ideas out of it. This works for us again, and we'll maybe report back after a trip and let you know how it goes. All right, thanks for tuning in. If you guys have any comments, place them down below. Subscribe, hit the bell, you know, do all that fancy stuff that everybody does on YouTube. Thanks again for watching, guys. Appreciate it.